Moses Malone was one of NBA's most dominant forces who went straight from high school to professional basketball and revolutionized the center position. He went from being the first modern prep-to-pro player to becoming a three-time MVP and NBA champion. However, in 2015, at just 60 years old, Moses Malone would go to sleep and never wake up again.
Knocked away by Cheeks and a seal. Cheeks will use up the clock. No Malone. And that knew it. And look at the Sir bench. Finally, Moses Malone knew the champions.
In 1955, Moses Eugene Malone was born in the small town of Petersburg, Virginia. While other NBA greats had two-parent households or extended family support, Moses was raised primarily by his mother, Mary, a woman who had to abandon her own education after the 5th grade to make ends meet. Behind the shy exterior of this young boy lived something rare, a burning intensity that coaches search careers for but seldom find. When Moses first wrapped his hands around a basketball, something clicked. The neighborhood kids noticed it. His teachers noticed it. But what they couldn't possibly know was that they were witnessing the birth of a revolution in professional basketball. At Petersburg High School, something magical happened. Moses didn't just join the Crimson Wave basketball team, he became its crashing tsunami. Picture this. In his junior and senior years, opposing teams arrived with hope, but left with nothing but defeat. 50 consecutive victories. Back-to-back Virginia State championships. The entire town began arranging their schedules around Crimson Wave games just to witness this phenomenon in high tops. College scouts descended on Petersburg like gold rushers to California. Who would land this once-in-a-generation talent? The University of Maryland won the sweepstakes when Moses signed his letter of intent. The basketball world thought they knew what would happen next. 4 years of collegiate dominance before entering the NBA. But Moses Malone was about to make a decision that would change professional basketball forever, setting in motion events that would reshape how we think about the game's greatest players. In the twilight of a basketball giant's life, a shadow fell that no one saw coming. How does a legend's final chapter unfold? For Moses Malone, personal turmoil had become an unwelcome companion. His family, once his foundation, was fracturing before his eyes. Divorce papers filed, relationships strained, financial concerns mounting. The man who had conquered basketball's greatest heights now struggled with life's most basic challenges, his personal world crumbling even as his legacy remained untouchable. But just when the darkness seemed to be lifting, fate dealt its cruelest hand. What makes this story particularly heartbreaking? After months of working to rebuild his life, Moses had finally found his footing again. He was laughing more, reconnecting with old friends, making plans for the future. September 13th, 2015, a date now etched in basketball history. Moses was scheduled to appear at a charity golf tournament supporting single mothers, a cause deeply personal to him, given his own upbringing. His friends waited at the Norfolk, Virginia course, checking their watches as minutes turned to hours. The calls went straight to voicemail. Something wasn't right. The devastating discovery came when hotel staff entered room 210 at the Norfolk Waterside Marriott. The giant who had battled the NBA's toughest centers for decades lay motionless, having passed peacefully in his sleep. No struggle, no pain, just silence. The medical examiner would later confirm what many suspected. Cardiovascular disease had claimed him at just 60 years old. The heart that had powered him through 21 professional seasons had finally given out. How does the basketball world process such a loss? Former teammates broke down on national television. Rivals spoke through tears. Commissioner Adam Silver called an emergency press conference. Social media exploded with tributes from generations of players who had studied his techniques, marveled at his numbers, or simply grown up hearing the legends of his dominance. What made this loss particularly striking was the contrast with his early promise. Cast your mind back to Petersburg High School, where young Moses seemed invincible. 50 straight victories, a teenage phenomenon who couldn't be stopped. Standing an imposing 6 feet 10 inches and a solid 260 pounds, his physical presence alone was enough to intimidate opponents. His game was both beautiful and brutal, a combination of finesse and raw power rarely seen before or since. College should have been his next conquest, but Moses had different plans. In a move that stunned the basketball establishment, the American Basketball Association's Utah Stars selected this high school phenom in the third round of the 1974 draft. Would he really skip college entirely? Could a teenager really compete against grown men? Moses was about to provide an answer that would forever change how basketball viewed the transition from amateur to professional, a pioneering decision that would eventually pave the way for countless future stars to follow in his enormous footsteps. A fork in the road, college or pros? While the basketball establishment expected him to dominate the NCAA, Moses Malone shocked the sports world with an unprecedented gamble. Would you believe that in 1974, the idea of skipping college basketball entirely seemed almost blasphemous? Yet there stood Moses, barely 19 years old, signing a contract that made him an instant millionaire. 5 years, $1 million with the Utah Stars of the upstart ABA. What's rarely discussed about those early days? When Moses first stepped onto professional courts, he wasn't the imposing physical specimen we'd later remember. At a relatively slender 215 pounds stretched across his 6 feet 10 inches frame, he looked almost fragile compared to the bruising veterans he faced nightly. Coaches initially positioned him at forward, protecting their investment until his body could withstand the punishment dished out in the paint. But behind the scenes, a transformation was taking place. Grueling weight training sessions, protein-heavy meals, and countless hours of specialized drills designed to prepare him for basketball's most physically demanding position. The gamble paid immediate dividends. How quickly did this teenager adapt to the pro game? Fast enough to render the doubters speechless. By season's end, Moses had earned both ABA All-Star and All-Rookie honors, achievements that veterans spent years chasing. Basketball historians now recognize this moment as revolutionary. Moses Malone became the first player in modern professional basketball to successfully jump directly from high school to the pros, pioneering a path that future legends like Kevin Garnett, Kobe Bryant, and LeBron James would later follow. But the road to greatness rarely runs smooth. Just as his star was rising, disaster struck during the 1975-76 season, the ABA's final campaign. What happens when a young athlete's body betrays him at the worst possible moment? A devastating leg injury sidelined Moses completely, forcing him to watch from the bench as his professional future hung in the balance. The situation grew even more precarious when financial reality hit the Utah Stars. With mounting debts threatening to collapse the franchise, the team folded just 16 games into the season. Picture this scene. Team offices emptied, equipment sold off, and players scattered to the winds. In the midst of this chaos, Moses Malone, injured and uncertain, was essentially sold along with teammates to the Spirits of St. Louis, treated more like an asset than a human being. Despite these turbulent beginnings, the numbers tell an astonishing story. Across just 2 seasons in the wild, unstable ABA, Moses averaged a remarkable 17.2 points and 12.9 rebounds per game. Remember, these weren't accumulated against college competition. These were professional numbers posted by a teenager against hardened veterans fighting for their livelihoods. What makes these statistics even more impressive is knowing they were just the opening chapter of what would become one of basketball's most dominant careers. As the ABA prepared to merge with the NBA, insiders wondered, could this young phenomenon translate his raw talents to the more established league? Or would the increased competition expose him as someone who had made the leap too soon? Moses Malone was about to answer these questions in the most emphatic way possible. The legend who once seemed unwanted would soon become the most coveted player in basketball. Can you imagine being drafted twice in the same year? After the ABA-NBA merger sent shockwaves through professional basketball, Moses Malone found himself at the center of an unprecedented bidding war. The New Orleans Jazz, recognizing his extraordinary potential, made him the 3rd overall pick in the 1976 NBA draft. But the story takes another unexpected turn. In the special ABA dispersal draft that followed, the Portland Trail Blazers selected him 5th overall, believing they'd secured a cornerstone for their franchise. What happened next defies explanation. Portland, a team that would go on to win the NBA championship that very season, inexplicably traded Moses to the Buffalo Braves. Was it short-sightedness? Internal disagreement? Whatever the reason, this decision ranks among basketball's most consequential miscalculations. The relationship between Moses and Buffalo deteriorated almost immediately. After appearing in just 2 games, tensions boiled over regarding playing time. The Braves made another monumental mistake. They waived him outright, allowing any team to claim him without compensation. Enter the Houston Rockets, a franchise searching for identity. Did they realize they were about to acquire a player who would transform their organization forever? When Moses Malone arrived in Houston, something magical happened. The raw talent that had shown flashes in the ABA suddenly crystallized into dominance. His work ethic, already legendary, intensified to almost mythical proportions. Teammates reported finding him at practice facilities at 5 a.m., drenched in sweat, hours before mandatory sessions began. The evolution was startling. How does a player go from being waived to becoming unstoppable? Moses developed a signature playing style that frustrated opponents and delighted Rockets fans. His uncanny ability to read where missed shots would land, a skill he called getting the ball off the rim, turned him into a rebounding phenomenon. Opposing coaches deployed double and even triple teams, but Moses' determination proved unstoppable. His time in Houston redefined what basketball excellence looked like. The accolades poured in. Multiple Most Valuable Player awards, all NBA selections, and all-star appearances. But statistics alone don't capture Moses Malone's impact. His physical, relentless style inspired a generation of big men to embrace contact rather than avoid it. Every missed shot became an opportunity. Every loose ball was his personal mission. A single playoff moment encapsulates Moses' extraordinary abilities better than any collection of awards. During the second game of the 1977 Eastern Conference semifinals against the Washington Bullets, with the game hanging in the balance, Moses produced a performance that still seems impossible. 15 offensive rebounds in a single playoff game, a record that stands to this day. Picture that scene, exhausted defenders desperately trying to box him out, only to watch him secure possession after possession through sheer determination. Under Moses' leadership, the Rockets achieved unprecedented success, advancing all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, where they faced the Philadelphia 76ers. Though Houston fell in 6 hard-fought games, something significant was happening. The 76ers organization was taking notes. They witnessed firsthand the devastation Moses could inflict. They experienced his relentless rebounding, his scoring touch, his leadership. Little did anyone know that this playoff series was laying groundwork for what would become one of the most significant free agent acquisitions in sports history. A move that would ultimately deliver Moses Malone to Philadelphia and change the NBA's balance of power forever. What happens when a rising star faces his first major setback? Just as Moses Malone was establishing himself as a force in the NBA during his sophomore season, the dreaded news came: a stress fracture in his right foot. For a player whose game centered on explosiveness, positioning, and relentless activity, this diagnosis threatened everything he had built. Team doctors recommended extended rest. Sponsors worried about their investment. Fans held their breath. Would this injury derail what promised to be a historic career? The answer came in his triumphant return. How does an elite athlete respond to physical adversity? While others might have eased back cautiously, Moses attacked his rehabilitation with the same ferocity he showed on the boards. Behind closed doors, he transformed his recovery into a mission, strengthening not just his injured foot, but reinventing his entire approach to conditioning. What fans didn't see were the countless hours of specialized exercises, the meticulous attention to diet, the late-night ice baths. The results defied medical expectation. Despite missing significant time, games that could have cemented his statistical dominance, Moses returned to lead the entire NBA with 380 offensive rebounds, finishing second overall in total rebounding. Think about that achievement for a moment. missing weeks of action yet still outperforming every other player in one of basketball's most physically demanding categories. His performance earned him his first NBA All-Star selection in 1978, an honor that would become routine in the years ahead. But Moses wasn't satisfied with merely returning to form. He was planning domination. During the 1978-79 offseason, Moses embarked on a transformation that would change basketball history. What was his secret weapon? Adding 15 pounds of pure muscle to his frame, not through shortcuts, but through grueling scientific training that was decades ahead of its time. Moses understood what analytics departments would later confirm: that power and positioning could overcome even the most graceful athleticism. The newly fortified Moses unleashed a season of rebounding brilliance never before witnessed. Did you know his 587 offensive rebounds that season established an all-time single-season record that still stands over 40 years later? This wasn't just statistical excellence, it was basketball revolution. Moses Malone was redefining how centers approach the game, turning missed shots into offensive opportunities with scientific precision. The basketball establishment could no longer ignore his brilliance. All-NBA first team. All-defensive second team. Starting center for the East in the 1979 All-Star Game. But these accolades only tell part of the story. What made Moses truly special was the consistency, the nightly guarantee of production regardless of opponent, regardless of defensive scheme, regardless of fatigue. His approach to basketball became almost mythological among his peers. While other stars relied on flashy moves and highlight-worthy plays, Moses built his legend through basketball's most unglamorous aspects: positioning, timing, and sheer determination. Teammates marveled at his ability to predict exactly where a missed shot would land. Opponents dreaded the physical toll of battling him for 48 minutes. Coaches designed entire defensive systems just to contain him, often unsuccessfully. As the 1970s drew to a close, Moses Malone had transformed from a high school phenom, taking a risky professional leap into the NBA's most unstoppable interior force. But his greatest achievements, and the championship glory that would cement his legacy, still lay ahead, waiting for the moment when the perfect team would harness his extraordinary talents. The dawn of a new decade brought Moses Malone to the cusp of basketball immortality. Was anyone prepared for what would happen next? As the 1979-80 season unfolded, Moses established himself as nothing less than the second-best player in the entire NBA. The numbers tell part of the story, but the fear he instilled in opponents tells the rest. When Moses stepped onto the court, opposing coaches scrambled to adjust game plans, centers braced for physical punishment, and fans leaned forward in anticipation. What made his third consecutive All-Star selection so meaningful? It represented the basketball world's formal acknowledgement that Moses Malone wasn't just a statistical anomaly. He had become a cornerstone of the league, a player whose dominance had transformed from surprising to expected. His placement on the All-NBA second team further validated his elite status, though many Houston supporters argued vehemently that he deserved first-team honors. Behind the scenes, Moses was evolving in ways opponents would soon regret. How does an already dominant player find new dimensions? Through relentless self-improvement. While maintaining his rebounding supremacy, Moses began refining his offensive arsenal, developing a more reliable jump hook, improving his free throw shooting, and mastering the subtle art of drawing fouls when defenders grew frustrated with his physical play. The 1981-82 season represents the moment Moses Malone's brilliance could no longer be contained. His second MVP award didn't just honor individual excellence, it recognized a player who had fundamentally changed how the center position was played. What separated Moses from other great big men of his era? While competitors relied on grace and finesse, Moses embraced basketball's physical battles with a blue-collar approach that resonated with fans who appreciated honest effort over flashy highlights. His return to the All-NBA first team seemed inevitable, the natural recognition of a player operating at the absolute peak of his powers. But perhaps the most telling indicator of his offensive evolution came in a single remarkable night. A 53-point explosion that demonstrated Moses was far more than just a rebounding specialist. On this unforgettable evening, Moses didn't just score, he dominated, drawing defenders into foul trouble, controlling the paint, and demonstrating a scoring touch that complemented his legendary board work. As Moses continued setting new personal bests with his career-high scoring average, something shifted in the perception of his game. Was he simply an exceptional rebounder who could also score? Or was the basketball world witnessing something much rarer? A complete player whose diverse skills were finally receiving proper recognition? The answer would soon become clear as Moses approached a career crossroads that would lead him to his greatest team triumph. What Moses had built in Houston was remarkable, transforming from an unwanted cast-off to a two-time MVP. Yet for all his individual brilliance, championship glory remained elusive. As the 1982 offseason approached, basketball's most dominant big man was about to make a decision that would alter not just his legacy, but the entire competitive balance of the NBA. The Philadelphia 76ers were watching, waiting, and planning to pair Moses Malone with Julius Erving in what promised to be one of basketball's most formidable partnerships. The pinnacle of Moses Malone's career wasn't marked by professional triumphs alone. What happens when life's most significant personal and professional moments converge? In the midst of his MVP season, Moses experienced perhaps his most meaningful victory away from the hardwood. Who was the woman who captured the heart of basketball's most relentless warrior? His longtime girlfriend became Mrs. Malone after a relationship that had weathered 5 years of NBA schedules, road trips, and the unique pressures that accompany athletic stardom. Their love story had unfolded quietly behind the headlines, a relationship built on mutual support and understanding during Moses's rise from ABA prospect to NBA superstar. What made their connection special? While cameras focused on Moses's dominance in the paint, she provided the stable foundation that allowed him to pour everything into his craft. The private ceremony represented more than just a marriage. It symbolized Moses finding balance in a life previously defined almost exclusively by basketball. Did you know that teammates noticed an immediate change in Moses after his wedding? The famously reserved center began revealing glimpses of his personality in the locker room. The man known for few words started sharing occasional stories. The singular focus on basketball expanded to include conversations about home life and future plans. For Moses, family became more than just a support system. It transformed into his primary motivation. How does family change an athlete's perspective? When reporters asked what drove his legendary work ethic, Moses increasingly credited his wife and their growing family. "Before, I was playing for myself," he once confided to a teammate. "Now I'm playing for something bigger." This shift in mindset coincided with some of his most dominant performances, suggesting the stability of home life enhanced rather than distracted from his athletic focus. Their home quickly became a gathering place for teammates and their families. The Malones hosted holiday dinners, celebrated team victories, and created a sense of community that extended beyond the basketball court. Veterans on the team observed that Moses, once seen as intimidatingly intense, revealed a warmth and generosity in these settings that surprised those who knew him only from competition. As his career progressed through different cities and teams, one constant remained: Moses's unwavering commitment to maintaining a strong family foundation amid the chaos of professional sports. When contract negotiations arose, proximity to extended family often influenced his decisions as much as financial considerations. When injuries threatened playing time, the perspective gained from family life helped him maintain patience during recovery. The basketball legend who revolutionized his position with unmatched intensity discovered that his greatest source of strength wasn't found in weight rooms or practice facilities, but in the quiet moments at home. The man who taught a generation of centers how to battle for every rebound had found something worth fighting for that transcended sport entirely. A family legacy that would ultimately prove more meaningful than any championship banner or MVP trophy. The heights of success often cast the longest shadows. What happens when a giant of the game faces his greatest opponent yet? Heartbreak? The Malone marriage, once a foundation of stability, crumbled under pressures few outsiders could comprehend. Court documents revealed the devastating grounds: irreconcilable differences, cruelty, and adultery. The messy public dissolution shattered the private sanctuary Moses had built alongside his basketball empire. For a man whose identity had been forged through overcoming obstacles, this personal defeat proved uniquely devastating. How does someone process losing what matters most? The divorce papers might have legally dissolved the marriage, but Moses couldn't accept the emotional reality. The concept of family, something he'd built his entire adult life around, had vanished overnight. The void left behind was cavernous, and Moses began a dangerous spiral that teammates witnessed with growing alarm. What few saw during this dark period was a basketball legend, unraveling behind closed doors. The disciplined, focused competitor who had revolutionized the center position through methodical determination now directed that same intensity towards self-destruction. Sleep became elusive. Nutrition, once a cornerstone of his professional regimen, became an afterthought. The man who never missed voluntary workouts began disappearing for days. The situation deteriorated into behavior that crossed critical boundaries. Unable to process his grief healthily, Moses began appearing uninvited at his ex-wife's residence. What started as pleas for reconciliation evolved into something more concerning: surveillance of her activities and confrontations with her new partner. Friends attempted interventions. Team officials offered counseling resources. Fellow players tried providing perspective, but the emotional hurricane had already gained too much momentum. When Elfrida sought legal protection through a restraining order, it should have been a wake-up call. Instead, Moses' judgment became further clouded. In perhaps the most troubling escalation, he appeared at her workplace, creating a scene that required security intervention. This public manifestation of private pain revealed just how far the once unstoppable force had fallen in his personal life. For teammates who had witnessed Moses demolish the NBA's most intimidating defenders, this vulnerability was jarring. The man who had taught an entire generation of players about mental toughness and resilience now struggled with basic emotional regulation. The contrast was stark. On court, Moses remained productive, often channeling his turmoil into physical dominance. Off court, he was a man adrift, searching for anything resembling the stability family had once provided. This painful chapter represents the rarely discussed human cost of athletic greatness. Behind the statistics, championships, and accolades existed a man grappling with the same emotional challenges that confront us all, but doing so under the unforgiving spotlight of public attention. The basketball virtuoso who had mastered every aspect of his professional craft now faced a challenge for which no amount of practice could prepare him: rebuilding a life that extended beyond the boundaries of a basketball court. The fall of a basketball titan revealed the human beneath the jersey. How far would one of the NBA's most respected figures descend before finding his way back? January 1993 marked the shocking nadir: Moses Malone in handcuffs, arrested in Galveston, Texas. What brought him to this moment? He had crossed the bay separating him from his former wife's residence, deliberately violating the peace bond Elfrida had secured for protection. The mugshot that circulated through news outlets showed a man unrecognizable to those who had followed his stellar career. The basketball community reacted with disbelief. Could this really be the same Moses Malone? The disciplined warrior who never missed workouts? The consummate professional who mentored younger players? The quiet leader whose word was considered unbreakable? Former teammates defended him in interviews, insisting this behavior represented a temporary aberration rather than the true character of the man they knew. Coaches who had relied on his stability now struggled to reconcile these actions with the person who had anchored their teams. What makes this chapter particularly jarring is the complete personality reversal it represented. Moses had built his entire reputation, both on and off the court, on unwavering self-control and calculated decision-making. The man who could predict precisely where a missed shot would land now seemed unable to navigate the basic boundaries of interpersonal relationships. For sports psychologists, his case became a powerful study in how emotional devastation can override even the most disciplined minds. The arrest served as the wake-up call that previous interventions couldn't achieve. Facing potential jail time and the complete destruction of his legacy, Moses finally confronted the painful truth. He was spiraling toward irreversible damage. Was redemption still possible for a man who had fallen so far? Standing at this crossroads, Moses made perhaps the most courageous decision of his life, acknowledging he couldn't heal alone. The therapy process forced Moses to excavate painful truths he'd long buried. What emerged through these sessions? Behind the imposing physical presence and basketball dominance existed unresolved childhood wounds, relationship patterns that needed examination, and coping mechanisms ill-equipped for handling profound loss. The man who had conquered basketball's greatest challenges now faced his most difficult opponent, himself. The rebuilding process proved painstakingly slow. Unlike basketball, where results appeared on scoreboards and in statistical columns, personal growth offered few tangible metrics. Progress came in small victories, a peaceful interaction with his ex-wife regarding shared responsibilities, a heartfelt apology to those he'd frightened during his lowest moments, the gradual restoration of his emotional equilibrium. Former teammates noted the return of the Moses they recognized, thoughtful, measured, and focused on positive contribution. What makes Moses Malone's personal redemption story so powerful isn't just the dramatic fall and subsequent recovery, it's the lesson it provides about human resilience. The basketball legend who had once seemed invincible revealed profound vulnerability, then demonstrated the courage to address it directly. In doing so, he offered something perhaps more valuable than his basketball achievements: a template for confronting personal demons and emerging stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. As Moses gradually reclaimed his dignity and rebuilt fractured relationships, he added an unexpected final chapter to his legacy. Beyond the championships, MVP awards, and rebounding records emerged a man who had weathered his darkest storm and found his way back, providing hope for anyone facing their own personal struggles, regardless of whether they unfold on basketball's biggest stages or away from public view entirely. From personal wreckage emerged an unexpected legacy of mentorship. What transforms a fallen star into a guiding light? After confronting his own demons, Moses Malone discovered a profound new purpose: pouring his hard-earned wisdom into basketball's next generation. The man who once dominated through physical force now wielded something far more powerful: the ability to shape young minds and developing careers. How deep did his mentorship reach? No relationship better exemplifies Moses's impact than his connection with Charles Barkley. What began as professional guidance evolved into something far more significant: a bond so meaningful that Barkley openly referred to Moses as Dad. This wasn't casual terminology. It reflected the profound father-son dynamic that developed between them. When did this transformation occur? During Barkley's early days in Philadelphia, Moses took the raw, undisciplined rookie under his wing, seeing past the rough edges to the potential greatness beneath. The lessons Moses imparted transcended basketball fundamentals. What wisdom did he share with young Barkley? Everything from financial literacy to media management, from proper conditioning to navigating the complex social dynamics of professional sports. Former teammates recall Moses dragging an exhausted Barkley through punishing post-practice workouts, pushing him beyond perceived limits while simultaneously building his confidence through carefully chosen words of affirmation. Was Charles merely the beneficiary of special treatment? Far from it. Moses's mentorship extended throughout the league, creating an informal network of Moses's sons who carried his influence into the next era of basketball. Young centers sought his guidance on post moves and rebounding angles. Veterans solicited his advice on extending careers through strategic adaptation. Even coaches occasionally approached Moses for insight on reaching particular players. What made Moses's mentorship especially powerful was the authenticity behind it. Unlike many retired stars who glossed over their struggles, Moses shared his complete journey, including the painful chapters. How did this transparency impact his mentees? It created space for genuine connection. Young players facing their own challenges found in Moses someone who understood their struggles without judgment, who could offer guidance based not on theoretical ideals but on lived experience. The transformation was remarkable to witness. The man who had once violated restraining orders now counseled young players on the importance of healthy relationships. The figure who had temporarily lost control now taught emotional regulation techniques during high-pressure situations. The numbers tell only half the tale of basketball's most relentless force. How did a skinny teenager from Petersburg transform the game forever? They called him the chairman of the boards, a nickname that captured Moses Malone's unmatched rebounding dominance with elegant simplicity. By career's end, he had claimed an achievement that defied comprehension. The all-time leader in offensive rebounds, having led both the ABA and NBA in this critical category an astounding 9 times. What made this feat even more remarkable? His rebounding wasn't based on height advantage or extraordinary leaping ability. It was rooted in positioning, timing, and an unquenchable desire to secure every loose ball. The wealth that basketball brought Moses became a vehicle for generosity few witnessed firsthand. What drove his philanthropic spirit? Perhaps it was memory of his own childhood challenges that fueled his commitment to creating opportunities for others. While media attention focused on his on-court achievements, Moses quietly supported numerous social causes, educational initiatives in underserved communities, healthcare access programs, and mentorship opportunities for at-risk youth. Unlike many celebrities who leveraged charitable work for publicity, Moses often donated anonymously, believing impact mattered more than recognition. The question of what ultimately claimed Moses Malone at age 60 remains partially unanswered. Was it the physical toll of 21 professional seasons battling in the paint? The emotional stress of personal struggles? Genetic predisposition? Medical experts can debate the technical causes of cardiovascular disease, but such clinical explanations feel insufficient when accounting for the loss of such an extraordinary presence. What matters isn't the medical terminology but the profound void his passing created, in basketball, in philanthropy, and in the lives of countless individuals he influenced. Check out our video on Dennis Johnson and the stories behind his shocking death. Like and subscribe for 100 years of luck. Until next time.